this podcast is focused entirely on answering the question, what is leadership? And the show argues that leadership is a human act by which one exercises power provided by another to direct others to pursue a good esteemed by those united in a common purpose without regard for self. It may not be immediately apparent to you, but over time, if you stick with me, it will become apparent that this definition does a lot more to advance the idea of leadership than you might think. Well, first, it includes 5 essential components necessary for leadership to be leadership at all. Those 5 components are human acts, power, goods, purpose, and here's the kicker, love. Leadership is love.
And I realized that when I'm getting ready this morning, I'm thinking to myself, Matt, this is good because it makes people realize they are leaders. Okay, so some have titles and it's very clear. And then there are many people in our life, and we know them, that we see as leaders. And I think part of it, especially as a Catholic male, I think we have to, sometimes we really need to acknowledge God's grace in our life. So this is a long-winded way to saying, like, thank you for asking me to do this.
Yeah.
Because actually it's a great blessing. Because when you ask somebody to sit down and talk about it, and especially under the title of leadership defined, I think that one of the hardest parts of a leader is that or one of the traits, right? And not a trait in order to sell books, but like to really, what is it? Like I use the analogy of, you squeeze an olive, right, to get the olive oil, right? And you can only squeeze it once,
right.
And it's like, one of those traits is humility, right? Right. The leader really doesn't see himself as leading anything, right?
Right. Yeah.
Kind of like bungling along, and hopefully some people follow it, maybe,
Yeah.
But I think there's something in the mystery of that, right? And your emphasis on love, I think, is really good because I think that's the intangible, right? That's the sacrificial component, right? And whether it's and so many things in our life now, like I think about, I was listening to your intro. If you compare the George Washington model to the current president, or any president, not particularly Trump or Biden or anybody who's running for president, they're running for president, right? And just the idea that people have the ambition to become president, whereas before it was like, well, you didn't campaign and you didn't choose it, kind of like bishops now, in many ways, right? I mean, years ago, bishops were just chosen by people, and now, unfortunately, there's some ambition too. There's always ambition in every field. So I think that component of humility and then at the flip side of that is when you are called to sit down and talk about it, you have a duty to. Right? Because God doesn't give you that grace and that experience in order for you to have false humility and then run away and not help anyone. So long-winded is that if this can help anybody, particularly a younger person who's being thrust into that situation, that could be simply leading a family, leading a team, the junior high baseball team, then
Yeah. No, I think you make a lot of really great points in particular. And I appreciate the humor, the humility, but also in some degree, the way that you open there, saying that, like, why am I on here? I'm not a leader. Yeah. And I know you say that with a degree of jest, right? But there's always a little truth in jest, right?
Sure, of course.
And you are, right? And I know that you know that you are, and I know that many other people who find themselves in a situation where they're, quote unquote, not leading anybody, meaning, and what they mean by that, of course, is that they're not assigned to a structural role.
Yes.
Right? They don't find themselves in a hierarchy.
Yeah.
And so we have this sort of like mented idea of leadership as being embedded in a hierarchy. And if you don't have somebody reporting to you, de facto, you're not in a position of quote unquote leadership. Yeah. I think that's a problem. I think that's somewhere in the course of our discussion in this podcast, we're going to dismantle some of our misconceptions of what it means to be a leader. We're going to move away from this idea that you have to have status and title, that you need a trait or characteristic. You need competency. Yeah. And we'll talk about that, right? Yeah. You need to be competent.
Yes.
What I think many of our listeners will understand when you're in a situation where you're called upon to perform a task and we're not able to because we aren't trained, we don't have the experience,
Exactly, yeah.
we don't have the skill, that we look to others to guide us, to direct us, that we have to find ourselves humble enough to accept, to be teachable, to be able to be coached.
Yeah.
But what's remarkable is that those who have the skill, who have the talent or the attribute or the competency to elevate and direct us into that same excellence of performance, they are acting as a leader, whether or not they are, as we might call subordinate to or
Exactly.
or subject under.
Exactly.
I'll say this quickly, and then I want to invite your response to this. I'm a military officer, senior ranking, lieutenant colonel. I walk into a room, junior officers will stand at attention. Many of them will render the proper honors and respect that are afforded to my position and status in office. I direct each of them to sit. I'll sit at the table, at the head of the table. We'll go through whatever set of slides are being presented to me, whatever topic I called the meeting for. And more often than not, it's on a topic that I may not be familiar with, which is why they're providing a brief to me. And it doesn't matter if the officer is junior by 1, 2, or 3 ranks. It doesn't matter if it's an enlisted NCO at that point. When they're standing there in a position of instruction and they're imparting information to me in order that I lack, in order to invite me into that shared knowledge that they have, they're leading me at that moment. And there's a reality to the fact that I have to humble myself to receive and be guided into that knowledge. That is a way of, I have to be led into that knowledge. And I become a different person as a result of it. I'm being elevated into something profound. It's a shared experience. It's that relationship that is at the heart, I believe, of leadership. And it's where if an individual sees themselves as leader all the time and they don't bring themselves to the point to allow others to guide and direct them, I have a lot of concern that that's going to lead to counterproductive and toxic outcomes.